All right, now that we have our file panel set up so that we have FTP going and everything, right? We've got our local files on the left, our remote server files on the right. We can go ahead and get started where we actually, let's go back to that and open our local file, and let's take a peek. And what we're going to do is we're going to edit locally and then upload, and then we're going to take a peek at stuff as we work through it. So anyway, I'm going to drill down into my TopCat folder. All right, and then I'm going to find a file that is called functions. And so I'm going to open that file. And just so that you can see things a little bit better, in the video, I'm going to adjust my preferences, and you can do this too. If you go to fonts, you can make your typography or your code smaller or bigger. I'm going to make mine about 14 so that it's easier for you to see in the video. Okay, so I'm going to kind of just talk about a few of these things here. So the first thing is where it's on line 11, we've got the content width. And the default content width is set currently to 640 pixels. I think that's way too small. Basically what that does is it limits the maximum pixel dimension, the maximum fixed pixel dimension, to 640 pixels wide, no matter how big the screen is. In this day and age, I find that that's sort of problematic, especially because we do have the ability to make things responsive. And so I'm going to at least increase mine to 800. You can make it a little bit bigger, but just be warned, depending on what your design is, all right, that's the trick, depending on what your design is, be aware that the bigger you make it, the more careful you're going to have to be about your line length and your margins and things like that, because the longer your text lines are, sort of like graphic design wise, like your readability goes down. Okay, and that's not always true, but like once a line gets over a certain number of words, then the readability starts to go way down. Okay, so the standard is about 12-ish words in on web design. It's about somewhere in the ballpark of 30 for print, and so you can kind of, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's sort of statistically what studies have shown. People's thresholds are a little different now, so you can adjust this, but so that's based on your design, but you need to just be careful with this. I'm going to start with 800, and I can always come back later and mess around with that if I don't like what it's doing. All right, and moving down, if you look at line 15, what we have is we're looking to see, first of all, if this TopCat setup exists. So we're saying if this function exists, or excuse me, if it does not exist, that's what this bang symbol is. It's saying if this function called TopCat setup does not exist, then what we're going to do is create that function. And what this is doing basically is it allows you to go ahead and use a child theme. And the way that that works is that in a child theme, I'm not going to get into it deeply, but in a child theme, what you would do is you would create the pages that you want to change and use it as your child theme. And so if you had another functions.php page that had a different TopCat setup, then this basically checks to see if it already exists, and if it does, then it doesn't run any of this other stuff. Okay, so anyway, we're going to go ahead and do our TopCat function setup, and there are some things that I just want to point out in here. I'm not going to go through every single little thing. And the other thing too I want to point out is that if you don't understand what something is doing, you can always read the comments too. Those are always going to be really helpful. It gives you reference information. We're going to come back later to registering the nav menu options. We'll deal with that later. And the theme support, where it's got add theme support, this is a function, and you can add certain things for HTML5, for instance, the search form, the comment form, things like this. It's going to do HTML5 types of forms, for instance, or these kinds of things that depend specifically on HTML5. And a lot of this stuff is going to refer back to things that are happening in the core files that you're not supposed to touch. Remember, anything outside of WP content, you're not supposed to touch, right? Those are all WordPress managed, and they're managed through updates and things like that. And then again, add theme support for different kinds of post formats. in the previous assignment, I kind of didn't go over this very much because I think they're kind of goofy. Unless you're using a blog that really relies on them, I always just use, for the most part, I use a standard uh, post format, but you can use these other specific types, and you could add more stuff here or delete stuff if you don't want to support, like post formats that are just a link or just a quote or just an image, right? Okay. And then it's got some other information too, where it's saying, all right, this is going to be your default color. This is going to be, it's saying these are the arguments. That's what args means. If you see something that says args, it's the Top Cat custom background arguments. And it's saying that there is no default image. You could put that there was a default image if you wanted, and so on. Okay. Now, I'm going to continue on, right? And then you've got this end if for the Top Cat setup. And then you've got some other stuff, add action, right? If you see something after there's a setup, you're going to see something that says add action, and then it's going to go and queue that up, and it's going to tell you where it's supposed to be adding it, and it's going to add that Top Cat setup for you. And it basically queues it up and loads it into all the things that are going to be loading. And here we've got register widget area. Again, this is something I'm going to come back to, but basically you can register your own special widgets later. So you would create all of your different registered sidebars. You would say register sidebar, and you would basically give it a name. Like right now, the basic sidebar that comes default with WordPress is just called sidebar 1, but you could call it footer, you could call it header, you could call it hero, if you wanted something that was going to be a hero widget area, whatever. And then you would style it however you wanted, okay? And then later you would go ahead and add the action so that it's going to initiate all of the different sidebars that you registered. But we'll go back later and I'll show you how to do that. Where we've got function Top Cat scripts, there are a bunch of things that we're going to come back here and do. All of this stuff is going to be really, really important. And then, again, this is saying what it's going to require. It's requiring, not include. Require means that it will fail and give a fatal page error if this thing does not exist. So it's looking for this thing that says get template directory. This is a function, and it's concatenating. Basically, when it says get template directory, it's going to go and pull the primary template directory that has been assigned to this particular WordPress installation, and then this dot is a full stop that concatenates the rest of this pathway, so it knows where to go and find all of these other required features. Okay, so here we've got template tags.php, extras.php, customizer.php, jetpack.php. So now that we sort of made it to the bottom of the page with some brief explanations, let's go back up to the top. And I want to show you something that you should adjust. I think if you're going based off of your book, it says around line 45. It's actually line 41 in my file, so there may have been some updates. But on line 41 right here, basically, or whatever line it happens to be when you're watching this, there's a thing that says add theme support for post thumbnails. And you want to take the 2 comment marks off of that, those 2 forward slashes. The reason that you want to do this is that it will start to allow us to integrate image support into our theme. And something else that you want to go ahead and do is down at the bottom where we were before, you want to come down here. There's on line 110, this is still correct. There's something that says require get template directory for a custom header. And you want to go ahead and uncomment that as well. And what this will allow us to do is it'll allow you to use the customizer to make modifications to your header image. All right, so let's go ahead and save what we've got so far. Right now it's not saved. You see this little asterisk up here. So if I do a Command S on Mac or Control S on Windows, it saves. You can also go to a file and save right here. I'm going to go ahead now and where it says Files, I'm going to go to my Files panel. And here's the thing: now that I have this fully functional in my setup. And I'm connected. If you're not connected, you'll see a little X here. You can click that button and it'll connect. I can just, I can click this button right here, the up arrow, and it should, if you hover over it, it's not doing it. Yeah, you should. It shows you that it says put files to remote server. Anytime you see something that says put, that's an FTP command to put is going to be to put a file up there. To get is going to be to download a file. If I click on this, it's going to overwrite it for me. But before we do that, just really quickly, one of the things you can do is you can go over here to excuse me, your browser, and we can go to our directory, and let's go to our WordPress installation, and this is what it looks like right now. And all right, if you wanted to take a peek at the back end of it, we could log into the back. So we could come here and go to WP admin, and I'm going to get rid of the rest of that, and it should take me to my login screen. And so this is where I'm going to log in. I think that my user was something like this. Let's log in here. All right, so I am here in my back end, and one of the things you can look at, if you go to appearance, you can go to customize. You can also look at this list here. I want you to pay attention to this list here. We'll click on customize. And I want you to just sort of pay attention right here to what this looks like. Now I'm going to come over here to Dreamweaver, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the put symbol, and it says preparing to upload, and it should have uploaded it. And if you wanted to take a peek, you could make sure, this is one thing that you could do, right? Just maybe the first time you do this, you can go over here. This is one of the ways to double check that your stuff is uploading properly. So it should have uploaded it properly. I can go into my cPanel, and if I look at functions, one of the things I can do really quick is I can just say view, and it'll show me my functions page. And you can see here that it did update it, because now it says 800. Remember before it said 640, and you could check to see that your other stuff is fixed. Like for instance, we uncommented this line. See that the comment marks are gone. So it did upload it, in fact. So that's one way that you can double check that it actually worked, maybe the first time, or if you are trying to troubleshoot something, you can do that. And also remember too, if you're having trouble getting something to refresh, if you hold down the Shift key in Chrome while you click on the reload page, it should do a hard reset for you, a hard refresh. Okay, so now I'm going to just do a refresh of this. And one of the things that you'll notice now is I've got this new thing that says header image, because I created a new require down at the bottom of the page, if you remember that. All right, and that's one of those things that you wouldn't know how it changed it unless you looked at it in advance. So I just wanted to show you that, and I'm going to go ahead and close this. And the other thing that it would have changed that's not going to be as obvious is that it added the post thumbnail functionality. So I guess if you wanted to go back to customize really quickly and take a peek at this, you could click on header image, and basically what it allows you to do is add a new image that would come up here and behave as a background image up here. All right, so that's a way for you right now just to get started with a couple of basic changes. And then in the next video, I want to show you how you can customize the fonts by on-queuing them and adding them directly into your site in a way that is different than what you probably are used to using with web fonts, and where they're hosted somewhere else. I want to show you a way that you can always do it, whether your web host is available or not. It's actually happened in the past where some of my Google fonts don't show up because Google every once in a blue moon will go down, and if that happens, it will pull your whole site to a crashing halt. And so one of the ways to avoid that, and I'll show you in the next demo how to do it, is by downloading some Google fonts, turning them into web fonts, and using a tool to generate some web font script that you can use in your website so that it's hosted directly on your own site.